Hi, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is September 22nd. I'm joined today by news editor Dave Naylor, as usual. Hey, Dave.
Derek, how you doing?
Pretty good. And the always sunny and bright Corey Morgan, Alberta political columnist and host of The Corey Morgan Show.
Good afternoon.
It's just noon.
It's after now.
I suppose you're technically correct. All right. We've got an interesting show. We had really no shortage of ideas at our planning meeting before today's show. But today we're going to be discussing, can Kenney survive the day? Today is potentially a pivotal day in Alberta politics as the UCP caucus meet as we speak, potentially bringing a potential vote of no confidence against their leader from UCP MLAs. Believe it or not, it's also a completely separate topic. Can Kenney survive the week or the month? Because even if he makes it through today, this is going to be like an episode of American Gladiator. He's going to have a very difficult time. We're going to get into it and the exclusive, some of the exclusive news we've been bringing to you in the last 24 hours. The knives, speaking of conservative leaders in trouble, Erin O'Toole, the signs are appearing quickly that the knives are out for him. His sharp shift left having failed in the federal election, more right-leaning members of that party demanding an end to the O'Toole experiment. The People's Party of Canada, we're going to go through some analysis on how they did, but can they really keep their momentum going into the next election, roughly expected 2 years from now? If COVID's gone, can that party keep the level of support it's already gained, perhaps concentrate it to elect MPs? As well, People's Party have announced their candidates in the Alberta Senate election. A very interesting development. We're going to get into that. Before we get started, though, we want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued generous support. Without you, we couldn't be providing bailout-free Western media for you on a daily basis. Right now, our newsroom is turning out more stories than something like the Calgary Herald does on a daily basis, and we do it without a penny of government support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please go to westernstandardonline.com, click on membership. You could try it free for 15 days and cancel at any time if you don't like what you're getting. It's just $10 a month or $99 for the entire year, and we think you'll be happy with what you get. So let's start up now. Can Kenney survive the day? So before we get into trying to answer that question, Dave, why don't you set the table?
Where to begin, Derek? What a week, and it's only Wednesday. Since Jason Kenney brought in his fourth wave of COVID lockdown restrictions last week, there's been grumblings within the UC party, everywhere from the grassroots right up to cabinet. So as you mentioned, Kenney and his caucus are meeting today, and his leadership is expected to be the key topic of the discussion. MLA sources tell us that the shuffle yesterday involving Health Minister Tyler Shandro was just an attempt for Kenney to save his leadership, and Shandro became the fall guy for that. Whether that's
pretty easy landing, though.
Pretty easy landing. He's still in the cabinet. Gets to go to the labor ministry, and don't forget, he wasn't fired. He handed in his resignation. Believe that if you will. So the meeting's going on as we speak. Can Kenney survive? Will these MLAs have the guts to bring it up? Kenney was asked about it yesterday, and he seems quite nonplussed by it. He's not concerned. Says a leadership review at this time would be grossly negligent, considering the province is in a COVID pandemic. He says he's focused entirely on leading the province through the pandemic, and is not interested in politics at all. Believe that again if you wish. I think everything he does is politically related. So there you go. We're expecting to have some of our normal leaks out of the caucus coming up shortly. So we'll find out what's going on and whether or not he can survive the day.
Well, that's the question. We know now. MLAs have told us we'll see if they follow through. They might not try if they don't think they have the numbers, but certainly many reports that they're members of the UCP caucus are bringing forward a motion of non-confidence in Kenney's leadership at that caucus meeting today. Corey, can Kenney survive today?
I think he'll survive today, but I don't think he's got much shelf life left. He's got no base of support anywhere. He's alienated them all. I mean, the left side is well, they've always despised him. The right side now, you know, with the restrictions and the lack of communication. I mean, it's not even his actions, but the way he's presented them. I mean, it's often when things got tough, it became a game of hide and seek, or we'll put Hinshaw out and Kenney will go into hiding, or Kenney will come out. Like, it's just been run terribly, and he's lost confidence from people. To say that, you know, we're in the midst of a crisis, we can't review it. Well, we just went through a general election in the midst of a pandemic. So dealing with one premier's leadership is something I think we can deal with at this point. But he is in dire, dire trouble, and I don't see how he's going to get out of this.
That's my expectation. I'd be surprised if he steps down today, although they might well get the votes. But keeping in mind, even within a caucus vote, the cabinet is whipped. The cabinet must support the premier. They must step down from the cabinet if they're not supporting the premier, even in an internal caucus vote. At least that's my understanding in speaking to members of the caucus. What's different this time from the rebellion he faced from caucus in the late spring, early summer, was that time he was facing just kind of the more right-leaning Wild Rose faction of that caucus. Now he's facing the left side of his caucus, the more progressive conservatives, at the same time. So he doesn't have just the, I guess Drew Barnes is no longer in the caucus, same with Todd Loewen, but he's not just facing that kind of more Wild Rose, right-leaning and some libertarian-ish side. He's now facing progressive conservatives like Richard Godfrey, Leela here, very publicly ripped Jason Kenney in comments given to Dodd Braid, published at the Calgary Herald last night. Devastating comments, calling for Kenney to resign.
Yeah, and Kenney's got to respond to that now. Like, is he going to kick her out like he did past caucus members? Or is he going to let that fester and say, you can start calling for my resignation with impunity? I mean, these cards are falling.
Yeah, so if a leader, I mean, how much tolerance you have for dissent is one thing, but Kenney doesn't actually have that much tolerance for dissent on issues publicly. Maybe internally, maybe he does internally, but when Todd Loewen challenged the leadership of Jason Kenney, Kenney had no choice but to try and remove him. I think Todd Loewen was certainly right in his call. But, I mean, if you're going to remain the leader of the party, you can't have members of your caucus calling for your head publicly. That's, at least in Canada's silly party discipline system, that's essentially the rules. He's now had Leela here on the record calling for his head. Can he remove her? I don't think he has the votes. And if he goes after her, I mean, I think there's minimum 10 or 15 who would probably say we're going to. Even though they're on very different sides of the caucus with very different critiques of how Kenney has handled COVID, they're on both sides. I think at the very least, it'll be clear today that he's probably lost total control of caucus at an absolute minimum.
Yeah, it's a mess. And as Corey says, he's burned his bridges on both sides. You can't go to one side anymore because he's got no support on either side. Yeah,
so Kenney is largely left within caucus with the middle of caucus, which are largely going to be rallying around the premier on just a matter of support of him, either personal loyalty or he's buttering their bread or whatever reason. They're supporting Kenney himself, and they're kind of in the middle of the caucus. The views in caucus, at least, if COVID is a left-right thing, which it has largely become, I suppose, the progressive left end and the conservative libertarian right end, they're both at him, and he's left with a very narrow strip in the middle. And if that's enough to hold, we're probably going to know fairly soon. I imagine this caucus is not going to be quick, but it is entirely possible Kenney will be announcing the end of his premiership today. Probably not the smart money, although I put $5 on it. I don't think that's the smart money, not likely, but it is entirely within the realm of possibility it happens today. But if it doesn't happen today, at this point, I'm calling it. He is gone. one way or another. I cannot see any road back. There is a virtual certainty that if he remains premier, they will not just get defeated by the NDP, but they will get annihilated by the NDP, and to an extent the Wild Rose as well. And once MLAs, I mean, some MLAs are doing this out of principle. Other MLAs are just a matter of, I don't want to lose my seat. And they're going to lose a lot of seats right now if he remains premier. And once you hit that point, and they don't think that there's time for the premier to turn around, and I certainly do not think there's time for Kenney to turn it around at this point, because he has to heal things on the left and on the right, and you can't generally do both at the same time.
No.
So he's going to face more challenge. Let's say he survives today. He comes out and he's like the knight in Monty Python. He's missing his arms and legs, but he is still alive and he wants to bite their ankles off. Let's say Kenny's still alive at the end of today. What's he facing?
Well, he's facing basically open revolt from the grassroots. In a Western Standard exclusive this week, we had a story on 32, I think it was, separate riding associations, constituency riding associations that have pledged to go for an early leadership review of Kenney. Now, the party has one scheduled for late 2022, but that would leave it only 6 months before the next election. Really not enough time to hold a leadership campaign and get a new premier in there if, in fact, Kenney should lose that ballot. Kenney said yesterday at his press conference he welcomes reviews of his leadership, and it's no problem. But again, it's not the right time to do it. And it's not only
the right time to do it is right before the provincial election, clearly.
Exactly. And it's not only the grassroots now, it's people high up in his party. Another Western Standard exclusive was an open letter penned by a gentleman called Joel Mullen. And he is a vice president of the UCP, vice president of policy. And he initially called for a leadership review, but now he says the time has come that Kenney has to go now. And when you've got people that high up in the party calling for you to go, you are a dead man walking.
We've had a lot of exclusives. Another one late last night. I think someone tweeted, Siri, show me the most Alberta thing. And then they posted a screenshot of the headline we broke last night. George Canyon, country star George Canyon, and the man who sings "O Canada" at the Calgary Flames, will be announcing that he is running for the presidency of the UCP at their coming November convention on a platform with a single mandate, leadership review of Kenney. Corey, can this guy get a break?
No. Well, he set his own stage. His fate, Kenney's fate was sealed when the pandemic resurged in Alberta. That was it. I mean, he made it clear, we are open forever. We are open for good. People took that to the bank. They felt confident about it. They looked forward to getting back to normal. Now, I know it wasn't probably within Kenney's control to stop that resurgence, or perhaps he could have mitigated it. But the bottom line was, this is where he infuriated both sides. People who feel that government intervention could have stopped this resurgence are livid with him. I mean, you listen to NDP Joe Vipond. He's on there just to howl, and he's saying every death is at Kenney's feet. Kenney has killed people. That's how heated that rhetoric is coming from that side. On the other side, people said, hey, you told me we were open. You told me this is going to work. And it blew up. We're back into restrictions. We got Nenshi holding an emergency meeting now, undercutting in the city of Calgary, might bring in city restrictions if Kenney doesn't. It's just a catastrophe. He cannot recover from this.
And we're getting alarming death tolls on a daily basis now. 29 dead just yesterday. It's incredible. And just back to Canyon for a moment. He is an experienced politician. He's not a raw rookie.
He's put his foot in the water.
He's put his foot in the water. He ran in the 2019 federal election. He was Nova Scotia born, so he ran in the riding of Central Nova down in Nova Scotia and came second to the Liberal candidate. So he's has a little practice in the art of campaigning, and as Derek said, if he wins, he will push for the immediate removal of Kenney.
Well, and if he wins, actually, literally the election of him as the president of the party would just be essentially taken as a vote of non-confidence by the members. Like, you don't even need to get to the leadership review at that point a couple months later, because if the members have elected the man really just on a one-issue mandate to more or less recall Kenney, well, then the members have already voted to do it. Like, you almost don't need to go through the formality of it at that point. The members have given a mandate that they want Kenney's leadership gone at that point. You've got the constituency associations coming at him. Caucus is going right now today. If they can't do the job today, they're certainly going to make it continually messy. I would expect if they don't get the votes to get rid of him today, I'd be fairly surprised if we don't have MLAs on the record speaking with their names, not just as anonymous, not for attribution MLAs, but on the record calling for Kenney's resignation. I'd be quite surprised if we don't see that today at a minimum. You've got the CAs coming at him. You've got Canyon and the convention coming now, which is going to be a de facto leadership review.
We're going to get a split caucus. I mean, I'm getting rumblings. It reminds me almost of Stockwell Day when his end was coming too. If they can't get satisfaction within the caucus meetings, I could see members breaking aside and starting a new caucus within the legislature. I think it is. If you've got 4 seats, you get immediate party status.
They had the Democratic, so back, a bit of a history lesson here. After the 2000 federal election, Stockwell Day's leadership fell apart. He refused to step down as the leader of the Canadian Alliance. They couldn't get it done internally, and so, about up to a third of the federal Canadian Alliance caucus left that. They didn't start a new party, but they started essentially an independent Canadian Alliance caucus, and it was essentially in protest of Day's leadership, and that eventually brought enough leadership pressure to bear that Day was forced to step down, and that's when Stephen Harper won the leadership of the party. That is in the cards right now. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is very much in the cards as one of the options. It's being very actively discussed by, for lack of a better term, I just call them the underground, for kind of a general catch-all term, because it's the left and the right of their caucus, as we've been discussing. It's not like it'd necessarily be a wild rose caucus. I think it might be predominantly more on the right side of the party, but it'll have a lot of those progressives, Leela here, Richard Godfrey, these types who also want him gone. The idea is that he would step down. There'll be an interim premier elected by the caucus. The leading name is Rick McIver. He's kind of quiet, keeps his head down, doesn't really piss off one side or the other. He's like a moderate progressive conservative. He's not like Alison Redford left kind of thing, but he's not a wild roser either. One way or another, I think he's done.
Well, as we know, Kenney hates to apologize. Even when he apologized for the 4th set of COVID lockdowns in the press conference, he walked back on the apology.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. So does he have the advisors around him, and does he have the political sense to know when it's time to go?
No.
No, I think he might be that bleeding torso with no arms and no legs by the point that they finally drag him off that stage.
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
One MLA who spoke to us, of course we couldn't use their name, said that Kenney would rather blow the whole thing up than leave gracefully. I can appreciate you don't give up without a fight. I genuinely believe that he thinks he's the only guy who can lead Alberta, the only guy who can lead the United Conservative Party, that he is the party. So in his mind, this is not necessarily selfish. If he thinks he's the only one who can do it, well, then that's not necessarily a selfish thing in his mind. One MLA who spoke to us, and many others echoing the same sentiment, saying he would rather blow the whole thing up. He'll take the ship down in a flaming wreck before he goes. And let's not forget that just last spring, right around the time of the Bowden Rodeo, the Rogue Rodeo in Bowden, Kenney threatened the caucus with an early election if they didn't fall into line. We had many MLAs confirm that to us, saying, you guys fall into line or I'll call an early election. And I think that's increasingly a small possibility because Kenney his premiership is in such tatters. He would have virtually a 0% chance of winning that election. He'd get annihilated by the NDP and bitten off a bit on the right by Wild Rose as well. But it is a possibility. I don't think he'd go that way, but he could do it because if he gives into caucus and he steps down, well, he has a 0% chance of winning. He's just out. He's out of the game and it's over. If he goes to, if he calls a snap election, well, he'll very likely lose, but it's a better chance than zero. 1% is better than 0%. So whatever that chance, because he might just say, well, people are angry at me, but at the end of the day, I'm a great campaigner. I've never lost a campaign in my life, and Albertans are not naturally NDP, so maybe I can fight my way out of it.
And he's got enough realism and political experience too. That's something that's not been coming up. It's not just this pandemic, it's not recent decisions. They don't have any money. They're fundraising. They've been walloped by the NDP quarter after quarter after quarter. He's gonna.
But never underestimate the ability of Alberta Tories to borrow money. Remember, Jim Prentice did this. He borrowed a ton of money on the eve and into the first days of the 2015 campaign that ended the Tory dynasty after about 43, 44 years. He borrowed a ton of money. And what does it matter if you lose? It's not your money to pay back. It's the party's problem. He might be counting on there being a couple of folks around this area in downtown Calgary with some deep pockets who could finance that kind of thing because their members are not giving them money. Let's remember, days before they introduced the vaccine passport, the Tories had sent out an email to their members saying, donate money to us because we're against the vaccine passport. As far as I know, we need to make notice, we need to do a follow-up story. I want to know if they refunded a single penny of that money that they took from Conservative Party members for their campaign to fight against vaccine passports, and then a few days later impose a draconian vaccine passport. I'd like to know. I have a sneaking suspicion what the answer is.
Yeah, I do too. Let's talk about one name that we haven't mentioned yet, Brian Jean. He's sitting up there in Fort McMurray rubbing his hands, and he puts a post on Facebook yesterday saying that, hey, we're going to have a by-election up here. Should I run for my old seat? And of course, that got political tongues wagging in Alberta. He's a former leader of the Wild Rose. He would be probably the instant favorite, I would think, to maybe take over from Kenney if a leadership race was held. What do you think's going through his mind right now?
I don't think that as long as Kenney is there, he's not going to be approved to be a UCP candidate. They don't have real nominations. They have a vote, but these are heavily screened candidates, and not just screening to make sure they're not like rapists and murderers. It's does the leader like you as well? And there is 0% chance Jason Kenney would ever sign off on Brian Jean running under the UCP banner. So at present, he'd have to run as an independent or theoretically under another party's banner, although I don't think that's likely to happen. But they don't seem in any great hurry to call that by-election. And if Kenney is gone today, within the week, within the month, well, then that riding is still open for Brian Jean to claim. But if Kenney is gone, there is a 100% chance that Brian Jean is running for that seat and for the UCP leadership.
Yeah, well, the only reason Brian, he seems to like just kind of lobbing stones from the sidelines anyway, so who knows? But he will not run just to be an MLA. There's only one reason he'd want to enter the political realm again. He wants that top job. So yeah, he's not going to go in for anything less.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's...
Our production guy says maybe Danielle Smith will take a run at it.
Who knows? George Canyon, Corey Morgan. Alberta politics gets...
Derek Fildebrandt.
Well, that's one we can say no. Alberta politics is on an exponential craziness train right now. It gets exponentially insane every day. I said on election night, I'm going to bet you $20 that election night was not the most interesting day in politics this week. And I think today could be, and the next few days after will be, it's going to get crazier and crazier. But buckle up. Absolute latest, I cannot see Kenney just surviving the long term. Maybe he even stumbles to Christmas. Probably not, but I think his goose is cooked. Speaking of cooked gooses, let's turn to Erin O'Toole. I don't think his goose is cooked yet, but the knives are coming out. Dave, obviously he made this big shift pretty hard to the left. Snake Eyes didn't get any, the Conservatives, did they get one extra seat? I think they got one extra seat in the whole country, right?
Well, they're still counting as of today.
Yeah.
I thought they may have even actually lost a seat.
They might, because these mail-in ballots are likely to favor NDP and Liberal voters, so some of those marginal seats the Conservatives actually might end up losing.
Certainly O'Toole needed to do better, and he didn't. He held a press conference yesterday in Ottawa. He says the review of the campaign is already underway, and he took a shot at Maxime Bernier. Said he was just using the pandemic as an excuse to build up his PPC party, who campaigned against a mandatory vaccine policy. He slammed Trudeau for even calling the election in the first place and using the COVID pandemic as a wedge issue. But as you mentioned, the knives are already out. A member of the Tory National Committee,
National Council.
Is on the record. We're interviewing him in about half an hour.
Oh, are we?
Who says he's going to start the process to have O'Toole removed. When they get all the counting voted, I guess MPs will also gather to see whether the leadership should be looked at. But it was obvious that a move to the left did not work. They did not capture a single seat in Toronto. They lost a couple of seats in British Columbia. So I guess
Alberta.
And Alberta, right? They lost 3 in Alberta. So the switch didn't work. So I guess the internal question now for Tories is, where do you go from here? Do you go back to the right? Do you go back to the center?
So Corey, I mean, I think if Erin O'Toole would have won today, as I say, victory has many fathers, but defeat is an orphan. And if O'Toole would have won, most people in the Federal Conservative Party, on the right and the left of the party, would have said this was the right strategy. We got it done. Good, but they didn't. They lost. O'Toole implied on election night that they need to go even further left, and I think if they do that, they almost risk out-lefting maybe not the NDP, but the Liberals at least. And I don't know really where he goes from here. Can they moderate anymore?
There's always room to slide farther left,
I suppose, but I mean, they already lost a significant portion of the vote to the PPC. If you buy the theory that PPC votes are the property of the Conservative Party and that they were stolen away, then by that math, it cost the Conservatives 25 seats. That is a not insignificant number. That would have given them a bare plurality by like 3 to 5 seats or something. Not necessarily would have put them in government, but very close. Does O'Toole have a reasonable argument for hanging on as leader and getting another kick at the can?
Maybe reasonable. His crisis isn't nearly as immediate as what's going on with Jason Kenney.
No.
This is, people are still waiting for the dust to settle. I mean, we still got mail-in ballots coming. Not that it's going to change the outcome dramatically, but there's more of a slow boil can be starting with him. He does have to make his case. He has to expand on it beyond an election night speech. I mean, he didn't lose a whole bunch of ground either. That was the striking thing with that election, is just nothing changed. So I think there's a degree of support for people to say, well, we can still work with this, we can build this up, and we'll get him next time. And there are others who are saying, that's it, we compromised, it failed, we blew it, let's get back to where our base is again. He's got a battle, he's got trouble on his hands, the knives are out, but I think it's survivable, versus Kenney. I mean, all we're doing is trying to figure out which date it's going to happen. I think O'Toole may be able to pull himself through this. It depends on how he presents himself in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, well, let's turn towards where things are going with the People's Party. The People's Party actually getting some attention in even the legacy mainstream media now, because it was just impossible to ignore. I think they got just a little 5 to 6% 5 to 6% of the vote. They underperformed some polls. I would guesstimate that some of that was people heeding O'Toole's call to hold their nose and still vote Tory to stop Trudeau. I would expect it. The NDP normally underperform polls because some of them do that, go to the Liberal Party to stop the Conservatives. But an impressive showing nonetheless, but no seats. I mean, Bernier ran a national campaign as if he was running for Prime Minister, but seemed to pay remarkably little attention to actually winning his own seat in Beauce. On election night, he wasn't even in Beauce. He was in somewhere in Saskatchewan. Yeah. I think we're probably Saskatoon. I mean, if he was going to spend it outside of Beauce, I would have thought it would be Calgary or something. But it was an odd strategy. I remember when the Greens were coming up, they kind of did something similar. Elizabeth May in her first election. campaigned across the country like she was running for prime minister. They got a bunch of votes, snake eyes on seats. And then her second election, she just looked around the country and found the greenest riding she could find. I think called North Central Gulf Islands or something. So it's just pretty much part of Victoria, not technically. And focused there, won her seat. And then she built a beachhead. She got up to 3 seats. They're now down to 2. Where does the PPC, well, I guess first with his leadership, I mean, one of the, I think, fair criticisms of the PPC is they've actually never had a leadership race. It was just founded by the leader, and they had a leader. They never bothered going through it. He said he's probably going to put it up for a leadership review now, which is, I suppose, something. But where do you think where are things going here for Maxime Bernier and the PPC?
Well, I think Bernier is very popular within the PPC as their leader. If there was a leadership review, I think he would pass quite handily. They took 8% of the vote in Alberta, which is a not insignificant amount. Jason Kenney yesterday said those are probably people who voted for him in the last provincial election. So there's no doubt that they did take seats away from the Tories in Alberta. They may have cost them 1 seat, Edmonton-Griesbach, where the NDP barely got by incumbent Kerry Diot, and the PPC candidate there got a large number of votes too. That could have been the difference.
It might have also been Edmonton Centre. I'm not sure. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah.
No. But the campaigning is going to continue, Derek, in Alberta, because we've got our Senate election. And today, or late last night, the PPC announced their 3 candidates for the Senate election. You've got Nadine Wellwood, who ran in Banff Airdrie for the party in the election. Didn't do so well, came 4th, I think. But you've got Anne McCormick up in north of Vermilion. She came 2nd in her riding. She has a very popular local MP, but still managed to come 2nd. She got 12% of the vote, which is good going. She's the second candidate, and Kelly Lorenz, I'll probably mispronounce his last name, Lorenz in Red Deer Mountain View. He's their 3rd candidate. Sounds like they're going to be traveling the province together, and Mad Max is going to come and join them on a couple of stops. So I talked to all 3. There's a story up on our website, westernstandardonline.com. All 3 of them they say they're happy. They get more weeks of getting out the PPC policy, and they get to campaign with Max. So
these people must be suckers for punishment, because you've just gone through a federal campaign, and if you're being realistic, I've run a suicide campaign before. It's hard to keep motivated when you know you're probably not going to win. So they just went through that, and now they're running for the Senate. Corey, the Senate's a very different beast, though. This kind of race, there is no. The Conservatives can't say, well, don't split the vote, because there is no Liberal. There is no New Democrats. There's a couple of independent lefties, but independents don't get elected in Alberta, period, especially provincially, and this is technically a provincial election, but it's also province-wide, and you get 3 votes. It's almost like a ranked ballot in a sense. It's a quasi-form of ranked ballot. There's going to be no argument about splitting the vote. This person is never going to see the light of day in the Senate, probably, because the Liberals aren't going to appoint them. This is very much just a moral exercise in Alberta, saying we want to elect our senators, not have Trudeau appoint them. There's an extraordinarily small chance Justin Trudeau would respect the election.
I think he's going to appoint one midway through the campaign. We got openings right now.
There's two right now. He might do it just to be a dick.
Well, just to prove the point. Quit wasting your energy.
Mm-hmm. Well, look what he did the last time. When the election kicked off, Jason Kenney met with Trudeau and said, look, we've got a Senate opening while we're holding a Senate election in a couple of months. Can you hold off on making that appointment? Trudeau turned around and appointed the mayor of Banff.
Yeah.
So, it was the big, denonet to Alberta, and he'll do it again.
So, no, these people are not going to go to the Senate unless, they'll get on the waiting list, and maybe in 2 years the federal government changes. But that aside, do you think we actually have a race, or is this still essentially a race just between which Conservative candidate gets ranked the highest?
Well, we got a race on point of principle, and it's interesting. It'll be interesting to watch. Like, this is where you can remove that vote splitting argument, as you said. And I mean, I've been watching a lot of that. You know, and I'm getting annoyed with the conservative presumption that every PPC vote was a vote that they owned somehow. Like, we've demonstrated and seen that earlier. I would say predominantly the votes that went PPC were probably conservative types of voters, but not all of them. They engaged brand new voters. They cut into the Green voters. They cut into the Liberal voters. A lot of CPC voters just bloody well stayed home because they didn't like what they saw. So there's no doubt the PPC impacted the election, but you can't sit there and use that as an excuse for having lost it. Sorry, you lost it. They didn't steal it from you. So let's stop that narrative because you're going to lose the next one if you stick to it. But this gives at least that opportunity now for Albertans to say, well, is there something to this party? Is there something more? The PPC is going to have to expand a bit more in depth. I mean, they've cornered a market of people who are concerned with restrictions, vaccination passports, and those sorts of things. But they haven't really broadened beyond that. I know they have a larger policy set, but nobody's talking about that. So we're going to see in this campaign if they're going to be able to talk in a bigger sense, because I think it's a hard ceiling with just that anti-restriction sort of platform. You've got to bring more people in, and we're going to test that ability in this next month.
I actually have been very interested in the way the Conservative Party of Canada candidate, because remember, these are, provincial parties are outlawed from running candidates. These are federal parties, even though the province is holding an election. It's a bizarre, terribly designed system. But the Conservative Party of Canada candidates, who are also sort of affiliated with the UCP, sort of, in this weird, complicated system.
Circles,
yeah. It's a Byzantine system they've built up. It's not just mixed circles. They're listed as a federal candidate, but they also have official endorsement from the provincial parties if they want, but not necessarily, and it doesn't show up on the ballot. It's really screwy. But these Senate candidates, they are running technically for the Conservative Party of Canada. The Conservative Party of Canada is officially supporting a carbon tax. The Conservative Party of Canada officially opposes any change to equalization. I don't know those candidates too well, but are they going to break ranks with Erin O'Toole and his official party policy? Like, that's actually, remember, that's not the member pass policy. The member pass policy opposes a carbon tax. The member pass policy, well, doesn't mention equalization really, but are they going to break ranks and run as more of an Alberta UCP candidate? Or are they going to run as federal Conservative candidates? And if they go to Alberta, is Erin O'Toole going to do anything about it? It'll be interesting, because if they're running as Erin O'Toole Conservatives, I think it's going to cost them a lot of votes. And I'm not sure PPC can get over the threshold to actually get some of those top spots and win. But it would be a humiliation for the Conservatives not to triumph in what should be essentially a one-party state.
Yeah, well, it gives us an opportunity. I think if I was a CPC Senate candidate, which everybody should be thankful I'm not, but what I would be framing it as is I want to make the Senate functional again for what it was supposed to be, a house of sober second thought, which means I don't necessarily toe the line of the parliamentary group. I'm there to look at it again and from more of a regional lens, and may reevaluate policy based on my interest in Alberta as opposed to the national ones of the federal party. Like, you can make that campaign or that case that way, where you're still conservative, you're still with the party, but you're distancing yourself and saying, I'm going to look out for you rather than the party. Now, how believable that is again up to the candidates and so on.
It sounds like what every candidate says.
It is a different house of government, so you can kind of frame a campaign that way.
Well, the good thing about the Senate is once you're there forever. So it's not like they can take your nomination away or something. You're in the Senate. If you actually get there, you're there for good. And also, it's not that they're also not going to be there for life, because they're just not going to go to the Senate. I still think we should elect senators, although I think that the new Senate legislation we have for this process really delegitimizes the process that they're outlawing the provincial parties from going. Jason Kenney's probably very glad he has made this not provincial parties right now. He'd be in a pretty sore position.
I don't want to be in the middle of that.
No,
It's one
no.
more headache.
Well, all right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much all for joining us today. We want to thank all of our Western Standard members. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please try it out. 15 days free. You can go to westernstandardonline.com, click on membership. It's only $10 a month or $99 for an entire year to support bailout-free Western media. We provide the most breaking stories, I think, of any media right now in Western Canada. We're keeping them coming hot and fast. Our newsroom is a very busy place, very sweaty and hot. It's a bit of a swamp in there right now. But please support our work. We appreciate everything that you do to support what we do. Thank you very much, and God bless.